Hey guys, what's up? I got everybody here from TMI. Don't forget to write us an email at tmipodcast2018. That's tmipodcast2018 at gmail.com. Let us know how we're doing. Also, check us out on Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast 2018. Just use the numbers, don't spell it out.
Ooh, don't forget Facebook.com/TMI podcast 2018.
Follow us on the Apple Podcast app. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review.
All you YouTubers out there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, TMI Podcast 2018. Look for the popcorn bucket.
That's right. Also, check us out on Spotify and the Google Play Music app for all you Android users. Follow us and subscribe everywhere. We appreciate it. We're doing it for you guys, the fans. Thank you.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Dave Odinson Warhowski, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome, everybody.
We're back. All right, here we are.
Thanks for listening, everybody. And
Yes.
as you may be aware, this week is a very special episode.
Very special episode.
Very special episode. We're breaking format. And
we're
going to
creating new format.
Yeah, we're creating. Yeah, I guess so. And we are going to cover, and we're going to do this periodically when there's not a lot to talk about otherwise. So we're going to take a year, and it could be any year from the mid 70s, I think, which is where our memories probably stretch back to.
Probably.
Right up to today, I think, possibly to this year. And we're going to re-examine that year in terms of pop culture, movies, TV, music, and whatever may else pop into our minds about that particular year. Today, we are going to cover, for this episode, 1982.
It was a very good year.
Yes, it was. There was a lot going on, and a lot of, kids today, I think. Anybody that's maybe younger than 30 out there that's listening must think, it must have been such a drag to grow up then. You didn't have any internet. You didn't have any tablets. You didn't have any phones. Right. No, we didn't. But
video games with
we didn't know what we were missing. And as you will learn, or if you take the time to go back and look at what was happening in 82, there was no dearth of entertainment. We were pretty much given what the TV networks and the movie studios were offering because we didn't have anything else.
And your TV networks were basically 3 channels.
Yeah.
It was ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was it. If you're lucky, you had PBS.
Right. So, but it was not like there was, it was the dark ages where there was no programming except for
the golden age.
What was Ed Sullivan's little hand puppet?
Oh,
Topo Gigio.
Yeah. So it wasn't like that. You had choices. And as you will find out, we had a lot in 82. Yeah. And I look back at it fondly. So for most of the year, I was 11 years old in 1982, eating everything up. How about you, Jeff?
I was 14 the summer of 82.
You were 14?
So, yeah. And it's funny, going down this road, and Mike had mentioned it last week, which is this idea of this sci-fi romp through time and space. And I kind of feel like this is what it is, this podcast, which is it's forcing me to kind of go back and see myself at that age and try and, like Mike said, try and recapture the awe and the wonder of seeing some of these movies for the first time and putting myself in and as that 14-year-old kid living the year. So like you said, these kids nowadays are probably like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. But I'm looking at this list of movies that came out in this one year alone between the movies, the TV shows, and the music. And it was I'm looking back on it very fondly.
And the kids today would be lucky to have all this stuff at their disposal, I think. I think they wouldn't want to go back. I definitely wouldn't want to if I was back in 82.
Yeah, I mean, we came from the Stranger Things generation.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, basically.
We came from that reality. That was our reality.
Yeah, that was a reality.
So, Mike, how old were you in the summer of 82?
15.
15. Okay, so you were prime age. So you were in the theater probably for each of these movies that we were.
I mean, when I looked at the list, I said, I've seen all of these. And then I thought to myself, did all I do was go to movies?
Right. Right. I know for a fact 3/4 of these I saw on HBO. I probably saw, we were also talking the golden age of VHS tapes where you actually walk into a store and rent a movie. And they were so cost prohibitive. You couldn't buy them. They were like hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. And that was a great novelty at the time because it was new. I can watch Star Wars in my living room?
Yeah. Only 8 years after it came out. Yeah.
Or I can record off of HBO onto my VHS.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. This can't be legal.
Right. Recording cassette tapes, recording music off the radio.
Exactly. Yeah.
Commercials.
I can't tell you how many songs that I listen to now expecting the DJ to come in just because of those tapes that I made.
Or you had because cassettes tended to stretch over time. You'd get like a little warped signature in there. And to this day, I think it's like the Curly Shuffle or something. There was a warped little section in my tape and I expect it to show up.
Or remember when you had an album on cassette and they usually would start like
yep. Yes. Or they beep so you could turn the album over.
Yeah. Okay, well let's start with the movies of 82, and I've got the top 10 movies at the box office just to set the scene of what people were going to see. Number 10, Annie. I didn't even remember this was 82. I thought it was earlier, but I might be thinking of the Broadway show. But this was the big movie version. I think Carol Burnett was in it. Albert Finney was in it with a shaved head, I believe. He was Daddy
Warbucks?
Yeah, I think so. So, as a kid, it was kind of, I'm sure Mike probably didn't see this at 15, but, anybody 12 and younger, I think.
I was going to say, if you had a little sister, you're probably forced to watch this.
Yeah, or a mom that wanted to go see it and dragged you along. So
because it was based on the stage musical.
Yeah,
so.
It was. So Annie was number 10. Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was number 9 of the year.
There you go, which I don't know. Mike, were you... 15.
Yes.
It was R, right?
It was R, and my mother let me and my brother see it, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yes, with Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone, right?
No, Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds. Okay, but what am I thinking? Rhinestone. That's what I'm thinking.
And he sings in it, which is...
I was going to say it's a musical.
Burt Reynolds sings in it, and it's as horrible as you might imagine.
Uh-huh. Was there like, because it was a whorehouse, so was there like naughty scenes?
Yes, there were. Well, not like full on naughty scenes, but you got full frontal and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Dolly
Parton?
Yeah. So, not Dolly Parton.
So the R rating did not impede Mike whatsoever.
No, it only encouraged me.
So the next film, number 8 of the year, was Poltergeist, which we'll be getting back to a little bit later.
Scary.
Number 7, 48 Hours, starring the incomparable Eddie Murphy in his first...
There's another R-rated movie.
Yes, in his first...
That was mostly language, though, I think.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy was huge in the early 80s. He was big until probably 85. The Golden Child may have kind of sunk him from that. We still love The Golden Child, but... All right, so then the next, up next, number 6, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, which, again, we'll be getting back to a little bit later. God! Number 5, Porky's.
There you go. Another R-rated movie, man. That was a treasure trove of naughtiness in the 80s.
When these used to come out, I'd be like, I'll be seeing that on HBO. Like,
I do remember my parents actually went with friends to the drive-in to go see Porky's.
Oh, really?
But yeah, I did watch that on HBO.
The Glory Hole.
Saw it in the theater.
Yeah. That was Kim Cattrall long before her.
Long before Sex
in the City. She was Lassie.
Number 4, Rocky 3. I loved Rocky 3. Mr. T, Hulk Hogan as Thunderlips, the whole
Clubber Lang. That was also the kind of the onset of WWF, because the World Wrestling Federation so you had Hulk Hogan and wasn't Mr. T a part of that at some point or no?
Much later.
WrestleMania and all that stuff was kind of coming in.
Yeah, no, it was, and I think that's what helped usher it into the mainstream, was bringing Hulk Hogan onto it, and then a lot of people sort of switched over to that media to see what that was all about.
Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah,
I loved it.
It's been. I can honestly say I'm sure I've seen it, but it.
I don't know if I've ever watched it.
Yeah.
Number 2 is Tootsie.
Tootsie. That's a great movie.
Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman, so many times.
Yeah. That was a big HBO. That was on constantly, I think.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And number one, drum roll, please. E.T., the extraterrestrial.
Home.
Yes. And it's kind of hard now to really communicate like the big deal that E.T. was back in '82. It was just encompassed everything once it came out. Like every kid was obsessed with it. You know, you had to see it multiple times in a theater. And I think it's not really gotten its due as time has gone on, because you don't really hear about it in the same way that you do Star Wars, because there's never been any sequels. So it's kind of maybe been stuck in its time period, I think unfairly.
Well,
So,
it is true on Spielbergian, and you see the influences, even though, go back to Stranger Things, where the kids are sitting around the table and it's just constant talk. They're talking over each other. There's a lot of callbacks in Stranger Things to the setting and the characters and whatever in E.T. that you don't necessarily pick up on, but somebody who, watched this movie. This was one of the few movies. So last week I said Raiders was kind of like my last theater experience. But then again, I realized that my mother, it was probably the only movie experience I had with my mother outside of like early Disney, where she took me, my entire family, myself, my brother, and my little sister. My little sister was 10 years younger than me. So at 14, she's, the ripe old age of 4 years old. And we only went because my mother's girlfriend insisted that she take us to go see this movie. And it traumatized my sister to the point where she refuses to watch it to this day. She will not share it with her children. And I can turn this on the last 2 minutes of this movie and bawl like a baby.
Yeah, it was deeply traumatic.
And right?
To watch this.
It is. You're so invested in this rubber doll character. Yeah. It's such a performance, and you got to give it up to Drew Barrymore. I mean, who was probably only 4 or 5 of herself at the time, and it's just a phenomenal movie.
Yeah, but they make you fall in love with this thing like throughout the movie. And then you see it like white, pale, and at death's door.
Spoiler alert! No.
Yeah. That's a lot for a kid to take in.
It was, because he was dead.
Yeah.
Well, it hit Drew Barrymore hard, because didn't she start drinking and smoking by like the age of 6?
Maybe she was traumatized by the
I think, maybe we all would become addictive personalities if we had to live through that. So we're going to take 3 of our personal favorite films from '82 and do some quick takes on them. And so we've each chosen a film, and I think I'll go first. Mine was Blade Runner. Now, back in '82, again, I was 11 years old when this was released. This was an R-rated movie. So I did not get to see it in the theater. I did not see it until it came on HBO, probably late '82, maybe early '83.
Right.
I was very hyped about it because, of course, it's got Indiana Jones, Han Solo in it, Harrison Ford as Deckard, and directed by Ridley Scott, who directed Alien, which was already shaping up even back then to be my favorite movie of all time. So I was extremely excited to see it when it finally premiered on HBO. As a kid, I was just dumbfounded by it.
It's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in. And as as an 11-year-old, it was very slow. I was very bored because I remember at the same time the Road Warrior was showing on HBO. To compare the two, like a Ferrari and a jalopy.
It was a finely designed.
Yeah, so all those, the subtleties of the plot and everything else just were lost on me.
Right.
I did watch it all the way through, and I really did enjoy the chasing of the replicants aspect of it, because Harrison Ford plays Deckard, and he's charged with chasing 5 replicants or robots that have now been outlawed because they've begun to develop a rebellious streak.
A little Westworld carryover there.
So Rutger Hauer is in this as Roy Batty, as the craziest,
and he kills this movie. He just absolutely dominates.
And he's great. So leading up to that final confrontation between Deckard and Roy Batty was, that was the most exciting aspect of it for me as a kid. But because, the rest of it was kind of lost on me, I never revisited it over the years like I would anything else, like E.T. or Road Warrior or Conan, anything else that came out in '82. But so that's why I wanted to look at Blade Runner for this particular show, so I could reacquaint myself with it. And watching it again, I loved it, and I want to put it in my personal collection. I want to watch it over and over again just because there's so much there just from watching it. It was like watching it for the first time, as with brand new eyes. First of all, the effects in here, the whole cityscape of what Ridley Scott and his team created, and it's been duplicated so many times, even in the later Star Wars movies by George Lucas. Fifth Element, all these city scenes where you see all the overpopulation, flying cars, where everything's going on above the city, and the streets are just
right. If you live on the streets, you're like slum.
The aspect with the replicants as well. I came across a very interesting fan theory that the worlds of Blade Runner and Alien could possibly be the same.
How so?
Now this is a stretch. And you have to ignore some things, so
if you just
if you want to make it happen,
I can tie Star Trek and Star Wars together.
First of all, you've got the time. Blade Runner takes place in 2019, so unfortunately, we don't have flying cars yet. So I think maybe,
but next year,
they're coming.
Alien takes place in 2122, so it's like a century between the two films. But Ridley Scott himself, at one point when he was envisioning the world of Blade Runner, he said that he wanted to come up with a city where he could envision Parker and Brett going into one of these bars. Like he would want to see a city where he could envision these guys coming back home and going into a bar after they disembark from the Nostromo. So there's that aspect of it. The worlds of both movies are run by big corporations. Alien, we have Weyland-Yutani, and in Blade Runner, you have the Tyrell Corporation. You've got the whole replicant aspect. So Ash could be a replicant, in Alien.
Yeah.
So you've got that aspect of it. Plus, there are some shared graphics and special effects in between the two. And if you remember, when Ripley is getting in the shuttle to escape at the end of Alien, you see the big countdown on the monitor, and you see the purge in red when the shuttle disconnects from the Nostromo.
Yes.
You see that same graphic at the beginning of Blade Runner.
Huh.
The purge, I forget what scene it was, but it's the exact same graphic. And also, in Deckard's apartment, if you notice in the scenes in Alien, when you're on the Nostromo, you hear this humming in the background throughout the entire film. It's just the sound of the Nostromo.
It's just right.
Yeah, that is also the sound. The same exact sound is whenever you're in Deckard's apartment. You hear that sound as well. So, again, Ridley Scott has the right to recycle, any special effects he wants to. He's Ridley Scott. Right. But when you're watching this in mind, you're thinking, is he trying to say something? Is there a connection here? Because there are some plot points, like I said, with the replicants that kind of carry over. If not for that century's time that's in between the two stories, I would think that it's a very plausible theory. One that I would like to believe, but, take it or leave it.
Now, let me ask you this, which version did you watch? Because
there's multiple. Like, I got the Blu-ray from my local library. There were 7 different versions.
It's crazy. It's insane.
So I watched the original with the voiceover.
Yes, which I think is the most impactful.
And it's great because I love, hearing Harrison Ford talk me through this movie. And very Philip
it has like an old school,
it's like a Powers Booth, Philip Marlowe kind of voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of these cheesy, this is not from the movie, but like you can picture like him saying at some point,
James always
night was stormy.
I knew my night was ruined.
Yeah. So very film noirish kind of movie.
Set in the future.
It's funny. And set in the future, but it's a retrofitted future. I read this term online where they took some of the corporations of the day and had it all over the place, like in terms
they're
of
all defunct now. I think there's a
Atari,
running joke that
TDK, JVC,
none of which are in existence now.
Yeah, great for product placement in '82, but none of them which are in existence now. And let me just give a shout out to the replicant Leon, who's the first to get whacked by Deckard.
Oh yes,
because his scene, like watching the Blade Runner advertisements on HBO, his line "Time to die."
Right.
That has stuck with me forever.
And it's a throwaway line.
Yeah. So a quick popcorn bucket. I would give Blade Runner a solid 4.5 popcorn buckets, I think.
It's up there.
I'm going to watch it again.
I'm not sure I understand it to this day, but
there's entire college courses devoted to dissecting this movie.
I'll jump in and give it 4.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I do remember it being pretty impactful. There's also a theory out there that Deckard is actually a replicant himself. I don't know if they broached that in the new one, 2049.
They do. They do, but they don't really commit one way or the other. So
I know that's out there. It's been out there for a long time. I don't think Ridley Scott will even entertain, whether or not that's something that they thought. But I don't remember there being any real clues to it. I don't know.
Looking at some of the special features on the Blu-ray, Harrison Ford is adamant that Deckard is not a replicant,
Yeah.
while Ridley Scott is more of a, well, maybe he is. So
Right. He likes to keep that mystery going.
Yeah.
Watch it again. Watch another. We're going to cut out another version.
So who's up next? Who do
I think Mike wanted to go.
All right.
Okay, I'll take it away. So I wanted to revisit Poltergeist because it literally scared the pants off of me. So this was back in '82, and went with some of my friends to watch this. And I'm not someone that really is into the horror genre, so this was already something that I didn't exactly want to do, but ended up doing it anyhow. And the byproduct of that was I didn't sleep for 2 days, and it was only from sheer exhaustion that I was able to finally fall asleep. And this is kind of hung over me for a long period of time, so I wanted to get back into it and see if I had the same fear of this, or at least face my fears on this one. So I rewatched it last night, and it's the story of a suburban family in California whose, how should we say that, their home was abruptly invaded by a supernatural force. And I think really the star of this movie is Diane, who was played by JoBeth Williams as the mother. And so, a lot of people look at sort of Carol Ann as the star, but I didn't see it that way on the rewatch. And so eventually Mom pulls Carol Ann out of this sort of netherworld.
Right.
And you come to understand the reason that, and I had not remembered this, that the reason that she was really chosen by the poltergeist was she was born in the house. And the house was built over a graveyard in a new development in Cuesta Vista, California. They had moved the tombstones for the development, but they didn't move the actual tombs.
An ancient Indian burial ground?
Did we find that out in Poltergeist 2?
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, all right. I
don't know if that's
kind of remember. It's been that trope has been used so many times. It's been like a punchline.
Yeah.
And now kids nowadays don't even know what that static screen on the television is because television just runs 24/7.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things because they play at the end when the television goes off. They play the national anthem. Right. And then it goes to static. Okay. And nobody knows that anymore. But, when you were staying up late, that's what you would see. And you'd be like, okay, well, the night's done.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the movie. I mean, I wasn't, nearly as frightened as I was, when I was 15 years old. But I enjoyed it for what it was. And so I was looking at it more of, this controversy around the director who was Toby Hopper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
And Steven
Hopper?
I thought it was
Hooper.
I think it's Hooper.
Okay. So
Toby Hooper.
Toby
But
Hooper.
yeah, he directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You're correct.
Right. And I was just really looking at this from the eye because there was controversy because Steven Spielberg and also Kathleen Kennedy, which I did not know, were giving producer credits on this, but it really feels like a Steven Spielberg movie to me.
I thought that he actually had directed this. So yeah, this is probably one of his first executive producer roles.
Yeah. And so when I looked at it, it really feels like a Spielberg movie, which would make it the second movie of '82 with E.T. And they did a great job of, framing the shots, doing some foreshadowing. Early on in the movie, there's this picture of where the mom, who's played by JoBeth Williams, going to flush the parakeet down the toilet because it's now dead. And you get this like sort of silhouette of the parakeet on the back of the toilet lid. And it's, certainly a Steven Spielberg shot.
I remember the scene. Now the dad was Craig T. Nelson, right?
Coach.
Yeah. Mr. Incredible himself.
Incredible.
And there's a scene where he's in the bathroom in the mirror and he starts like tearing his face apart.
No, that's not him. That's one of the paranormal guys, right?
Oh, okay. See, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but I remember that being very disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, you look back on the special effects now and you think, wow, that looks, really underdone or very cheaply. But I mean, at the time, it was like, holy cow,
right.
Because it was absolutely frightening at the end. And then today you're like, well, that looks like a guy who's peeling off a fake
plastic
face.
Right.
And there was some other controversy around this because there were two deaths that followed this movie. One was in the same year with Dominique Dune, I believe, who played Dana. And then later, Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann.
So yeah, there's that kind of
that curse
of the
curse of Poltergeist.
It was I think 11 million to make and grossed 76 million. So
it was a
7 times return on this one.
Yeah,
7 times.
Yeah, I remember that this was out at the same time E.T. was out. So they were in theaters concurrently. And it was like, which do you choose? The dark side of Steven Spielberg or the light side of Steven Spielberg? Yeah.
And even E.T. was a little, it's got its dark moments, like we said, that, when the poor thing is dead.
Yeah. But then it more than makes up for it at the end. It could be one of the ultimate feel-good movies.
I know. Don't let's not even talk. I'm going to cry again, so let's not.
They had a great scene at the end of this movie where they're checking into the hotel
and
push the TV out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The family goes into the room and all of a sudden you see him push the TV out. Right. That's such a great end shot.
Now, did they mention that, Mike? Because that's very interesting because I don't remember that the reason the spirits wanted Carol Ann was because she was born in the house. They mention that in the movie?
They do. It's actually, you're just paying attention. You're like, yeah, one of my kids was born in this house. So it's a good movie. And I really liked, sort of how it captures, that time in the 80s. And one of the things that, when you look back at sort of Stranger Things, E.T., you really get the feel for the 80s where, people are actually like riding their bikes outside.
Yeah.
And running in packs with their friends. Right. Yeah. And, it captures that time period really well.
Yeah. I think I was too scared to see it in the theater.
I never would have seen it.
There was too much, the face pulling off scene was legendary in the school playground. Like the one kid that did see it, he pulled his face off in the mirror. This kid was in the sink. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to see this. And so then watching it on HBO, I was just so tense, waiting for that scene to come up.
Waiting
and then when you see it, you're like, okay, it's not so bad. And then then you watch it again. But yeah, going back to that first initial scene where the son gets dragged by the tree comes through his window. I think that is the scariest scene.
And it was very demonic looking, that tree.
Yeah. And like with the clown as well, as the little clown doll that he had was hiding under the bed, right? Is that was that how they set that up, Mike? Was the clown and the tree in the same scene?
Yeah, it is. And then later the clown comes back when they're all living in the house again, which I don't know why they would do that, but it was after Gina said, this house is clean. They come back and they put them back to bed in the same bedroom. And the clown's sitting on the chair, okay? And then Robbie wakes up and the clown's gone and you're like, oh, we're off again.
Yeah. It's like
poor parenting. That's some seriously poor parenting.
You ever see that Seinfeld episode where there's the clown, Mr. Jingles? And
Mr. Jingles, Mr. Jingles.
And you hear the little footsteps around Jerry's bed, Mr. Jingles.
Ouch.
Well, so how many popcorn buckets would we give Poltergeist?
I got to go 4.5. 4.5.
4.5. Oh.
Yeah, I think I would give it. I saw it many times back then when I was a kid, and I've enjoyed it every time. So I would give it 4. I would give it a solid 4 popcorn buckets. What about you, Jeff?
I got to go low. I don't know. Whoa. It's been a while. I mean, if I gave it 3, it would be pretty high. But part of it, again, I'm not a big fan of the scary stuff. I don't like the jump moments. But it's a completely different experience watching stuff like that in the theater as opposed to sitting in your house. And, Jim, we talk about this all the time, which is, I saw this on HBO. Our TVs were not high definition back in the day. They were crap. Mm-hmm. So, when you watch this stuff again, especially like Blade Runner, they've been cleaned up over the years. They're out on Blu-ray. It's a 4K. And so now you're seeing things that you never saw before. It's almost like watching a brand new movie because now your eyes all over the place. There's so much detail going on. You're not just invested in the main character. You're looking at the background characters, the designs, the sets, and all that other stuff that we missed, on the crappy low-res television.
Yeah, but we didn't know it was crappy low-res.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. No.
That's part of the fun of going back and watching these now, which is to kind of see it in a brand new light. Because when these directors made this stuff, they're shooting on film. They see that detail, but it just kind of gets lost in translation sometimes.
Yeah, it's not like you're a kid saying, "Oh, I'm in 1982. Come on."
Right.
Don't keep us in suspense. Buckets.
I gotta go. I'll say 3 just because it is such an iconic movie. Okay. But again, I'd have to watch it again to really embrace it.
Okay. Thanks for that, Jeff.
Yes. So you're up, Jeff. What did you choose?
So I chose. Well, I will say that I watched Tron the other night, and again, this is a movie that probably never would have gotten made except for the fact that Star Wars came out, and you're talking that you're right at the cusp of the video. I don't even know if Atari was in house yet. But you had to go to the arcade to play video games, whether it was, Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man or Centipede. And Tron just came along, and it's this. I thought it was very slow and plotting. Visually, it's all that 8-bit graphics. It looks like something I could, my kid could make on the computer nowadays. But I rewatched it again the other night, and I completely watched it like a 14-year-old, and was so invested. I loved it. I was happy to watch that again. It was funnier than I remember. But that's not the movie I want to talk about. So I just wanted to throw a shout out to Tron. It's not as bad as I remembered. Which is, I've said it on the show before, which is I was never really a big Star Trek fan. My stepfather and his brother were big into the TV show. I never really cared for it. I thought it was really slow. My stepfather did take my brother and I to the theater, the multiplex in Big Flats, to go see Star Trek, the motion picture. And that kind of, Star Wars was already out, and it kind of got me invested in the characters. And then Marvel, I think, started doing a comic series. So I started reading it, and then subsequently went back and started watching the TV show. But in 82, when Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan came out, this might have been one of the first where I went on my own to the drive-in with friends or whatever. And this movie blew me away. It was everything that's great about Star Trek. They went back into one of the original episodes and brought this character, Ricardo Montalban's Khan. It's off the charts. It's a great chase, and obviously you have, spoiler alert, ending that Spock sacrifices himself, which was huge. That's one of the main characters in this entire franchise, and he dies in the second movie. I remember the special effects being very well done for the day. You were invested in these characters, and that catapulted me into like completely. I'm all on board with Star Trek now because of this movie. The directing was great, the acting was great. Yeah,
story was great.
It was, yeah. I mean, it forced you to go back and watch that episode, which you couldn't just tune it up, pull it up on iTunes, or go find it on YouTube.
Yeah. But I remember, though, seeing Star Trek Wrath of Khan and being blown away by it. And again, I was really deeply disappointed by the original Star Trek movie, Star Trek Motion Picture.
Yeah, it's slow.
Talk about slow and plotting. It's just
right.
When
it's a tribute it's the tribute to the Enterprise. All it was porn scenes of the Enterprise flying through space.
Well, they spent all their budget on the model.
So Star Trek 2 was just like night and day. And I remember Channel 11, I think, had the syndicated rights at the time for the
PIX,
series.
Started like 11 o'clock every night.
Yeah, I think on opening weekend they were largely advertising the Khan episode of Star Trek. So
I
remember seeing that episode immediately after I saw the movie.
Right. The one slight that people like to bring up is the fact that Chekhov was not on that episode. He wasn't part of the crew yet. So in the movie, when he recognizes Khan, it makes no sense because he was not part of the crew. But whatever, that's quibbles, know. And I think Ricardo Montalban's chess piece gets just as much.
And Chekhov has that big scene with the earworm.
The worm. They shoved that in his ear. Yeah,
that's probably the most memorable scene for me.
And long before spoilers, I do remember. So a lot of times I didn't go to the movies. I would buy the comic books. Like I said, the Marvel was adapted, putting out the adaptation. You talked about that Time Bandits last week, but 9 out of 10 times I would have read the novel or read the comic book before I actually saw the movie. So I read the novel, and I will tell you, I cried when Spock died. But I remember specifically going into the local department store, and they had the newsstand right when you walk in, and it was either Cracked or Mad Magazine, and right on the cover, the mascot, I think it was Alfred E. Newman, and it's got Star Trek II spoof, and he's looking right at the reader, and he goes, "He's dead, Jim." And he's like, "Oh, did we ruin it for you?" like that was on the cover, like. Long before there were spoilers, people were still spoiling.
They were still spoiling, yeah.
That's right. So, but yeah, that was a big movie. That really, like I said, Star Trek kind of existed long before Star Wars, but they jumped on Star Wars, success, and were able to kind of revitalize that franchise and bring it up.
And I would just like to give a shout out to Ricardo Montalban as Khan, how he transcends his Mr. Rourke persona.
Because he was on Fantasy Island, and he was just benevolent. Well, I don't know if he was benevolent. He seemed a little. I never liked that show either.
And we cannot talk about Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan without some kind of tribute to William Shatner's outburst.
Scream out, "Khan! Khan!" And it just reverberates through the entire universe.
But it's almost as if after the tepid reaction to the original Star Trek, they knew that they had to step it up with the sequel, and they did in spades. The action in this was just great. The dogfight between the Enterprise and the Klingons.
It's been beat to shit.
Yeah. So how many popcorn buckets?
Oh, I got to go at least 4 on that one.
Yeah,
maybe even 4.5.
I think I would as well. 4.
Yeah,
4. I go 4 as well.
Yeah.
So classic films of the 80s, these three, and there's just many more as well.
Oh my God.
We went through the top 10, but there's some of the lesser movies. Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, Conan. I saw that in the drive-in.
Yeah.
Arnold.
Amazing how he got
the beginning of Arnold.
Yeah.
I'm sure that someday we will dedicate Conan as a classic movie because it is a classic.
James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones as what was his name?
I don't remember, but he had the long white hair, which is kind of cool looking.
It's like come my child. Creepshow we had that year. Creepshow was a great one. Firefox, you remember that with Clint Eastwood?
Oh, that's Clint Eastwood. Yeah, with the yep.
First Blood, which was the precursor to Rambo.
Well, you go back now and they actually add Rambo on the
so you know what it is.
Like
First Blood was a great movie. Rambo is just jingoistic stuff, but First Blood was just a great.
No, you just want to be left alone.
Yeah. Last Unicorn. Does anybody?
Yes.
No.
Oh, beautiful animated movie.
Megaforce.
I remember seeing ads for this
on the comic books.
I knew it from the looked awesome. All the different vehicles and whatever that was
Barry Bostwick was in
Barry Bostwick. That's who it was. Very disappointed when I finally saw that because it did not live up to the hype of the poster.
Right. Mike and I were discussing this one the other day. Night Shift. Michael Keaton.
Oh, Michael Keaton.
As the morgue attendants that are operating a brothel out of the morgue. Michael Keaton and Henry Winkler. Yeah.
Henry Winkler.
Yes. We had Pink Floyd The Wall, the movie version of The Wall with Bob Geldof.
That was a little too out there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little too depressing.
Yeah. Does anybody remember Q, the winged serpent?
Yes, I remember seeing that again. The box art. He's climbing up the side of the Chrysler building. Yeah.
Where like this giant prehistoric monster.
Yeah, but you rarely saw him, right?
And picks off topless sunbathers on.
There you go. He's like humanoids from the deep. He's just
And we actually had Dark Crystal. Yes, Dark Crystal.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yes. You just brought that up last week with the Skeksis.
With the Skeksis, yeah. So
that's a highly underrated movie.
Yeah, I have not seen that since probably 82, 83.
I have the DVD, like the special box edition, but I showed it. My kids have seen it. But I don't think it played as well as they were probably too young. Because again, there are some dark moments in that as well.
Talk about dark and campy. Swamp Thing.
Adrienne Barbeau and her Zungas.
Yeah, in her heyday. Yeah. And Louis Jourdan as the bad guy in that. And he turns into another Swamp Thing, and they have a big Swamp Thing fight at the end of the movie.
I don't remember that.
Oh, you got to watch that again.
I guess so. I do remember
it further in another episode. And we had John Carpenter's The Thing from
The Thing. That was
an all-time classic.
And that was a remake of the black and white 1950.
The old Howard Hawks, I think.
1951, 52, somewhere in there.
With James Arness as the title character.
And that was John Carpenter, John Carpenter, and who went on to make Kurt Russell was in that.
Kurt Russell, and they, was Escape from New York was before The Thing, and then they came out with The Thing afterwards. And then we had The Road Warrior in 1982.
Yep.
So it was a great year for cinema.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of movies that came down. Oh, you got to mention Zapped. With Scott Baio.
With Willie Ames.
Willie Ames, that's who I was looking for, yeah.
That's a punchline in Family Guy.
Yeah.
I think when they go back in time, that was the movie Peter was supposed to see with Lois.
Zapped.
I think I've seen that half a dozen times because that was a heavy rotation on HBO.
I think it was Scott Baio. Yeah, he was back in his heyday there. That was when Happy Days.
Did they get reunited in Charles in Charge? They were both in Charles in Charge as well, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Scott Baio and Willie Ames.
Which came first, though?
Charles in Charge had to have been afterwards.
Yeah.
Because he was still on Happy Days.
First, yeah.
And then they went to Joni Love Chachi before he went over to Charles in Charge.
So that's a good enough segue as any to move over into the TV of 1982. I think.
We didn't mention Beastmaster, though, but that was
Beastmaster, yes. Tanya Roberts.
Someone just asked me the other day, what was the name of the two ferrets? And I had to look it up because I couldn't remember.
Paying attention to anything in that movie except for Tanya
Roberts.
Exactly. I'm looking her up right now.
Yeah. All right. So you look at her. I will just say the two ferrets' names were Kodo and Podo.
Podo?
Just for those completists out
there. Does anybody remember Kindergarten Cop when just goes to his trunk of his car?
Yep.
Like, oh, wait a second, kids. Let me go to the trunk of my car. And he's got a ferret in the trunk of his car. Okay, so let's go into the TV of 1982.
Which was also another heyday. Because, again, you only had 3 channels. PIX didn't have unique programming. It was ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was it.
I mean, I watched Channel 9 and Channel 11. So
but they were like, they would show movies. You got a lot of your Godzilla stuff going on there in Channel 9, but not original content. They weren't putting out sitcoms. They weren't putting out dramas.
Yeah, Channel 9, Channel 11 were a great source of genre movies. So right. All my background in the genre of science fiction and horror came from Channel 11 and Channel 9.
Right.
So I have to give a shout out to them for that. But yes, in terms of the networks, they were very much, it wasn't like there was a dearth of material. They were taking, I think, ideas from the movies of the day and turning them into TV shows.
Just like we mentioned last week with Raiders of the Lost Ark, all of a sudden we got Tales of the Gold Monkey. Let's ride on the coattails. Exactly. Battlestar Galactica came straight off of Star Wars success. Lasted one season.
So did Buck Rogers as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We do need to clarify for our listeners. So we're in the Metro New York area. Yeah. And so there, in the 80s, there were 3 stations, ABC, CBS, NBC. And then we were lucky because I came in from Ohio that there were 2 additional stations, which we call Channel 9 and Channel 11, WPIX, and I forget what the other one is, which
WOR,
and so and PBS. So coming from Ohio, I basically doubled, the number of stations that were available. So it was a big deal. So I come back and say, well, this was fantastic because we had extra stations to watch.
Yeah, this was around the time we had lived in town for a while. So I did have access to PIX and those others. And then we built a house right around the time my sister was born. So 1978, 80 in that area. And when we moved up, there's not, to this day, there's no cable because you can't run cable unless there's 100 people within a 1 mile radius, and it's not going to happen. So as soon as I left for college, my parents got a satellite dish, but up to that point, everything came off the antenna. So we had ABC and NBC. We had to go out and get a booster just to be able to pick up CBS so we could watch the Super Bowl. But those were my only 3 channels.
So what did you pick for this show, Jeff? What was your highlight for TV?
Well, I jumped on board early with season 1 of Cheers because I don't really think Cheers got its due, or shows could go on for 4 or 5 years before they actually started picking up audiences. That nowadays if it they don't get their audience in 3 episodes, they cancel them.
Yeah.
But you had Family Ties, that was season 1. Police Squad was huge because it was so different, and it was just it was a lot of visual puns. It was coming off from the guys who created Airplane. You had Leslie Nielsen on there.
Yeah, and that translated right into the Naked Gun movies.
Yeah, that's basically where, right. Naked Gun movies came off from there. Newhart was season 1 as well. But you still had MASH. You still had Taxi. I was forced to watch Dukes of Hazzard every week because my sister just absolutely
forced. I love Dukes of Hazzard.
It was every, Saturday night? Now that I had Fridays, not that I had any bigger choices to really choose from, but like Happy Days was still on, Three's Company was still on, but the show that absolutely captivated me and I loved it, and I just posted on Instagram yesterday, or maybe it was the Facebook page, Greatest American Hero. Oh. Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3 are all on Decade.
Now that premiered in 81, right? That was
no, I think. I think it was because I just started watching. I don't know, but regardless, it impacted me so much that I actually begged my mom to get a perm to curl my hair to look like the lead character. I met Robert Culp before he passed away. I've met William Katt. But it was just, so we've brought this up on the show, which is, I was actually going to wear the shirt this morning too, and I forgot. Teacher is handed an alien spacesuit and he loses the instruction manual. So every week he's teamed up with this FBI agent and they thwart crime, but he's constantly bumbling. He's running into walls. He doesn't know how to use this thing properly. Great. One of the greatest theme songs ever. Believe it or not. Joey Scarborough. Yeah, that was a big hit on the radio. Do you remember because you know what? I think you're right. It was 81 because they changed his name halfway through the season.
William Katt's character's name?
Yes, his name was Ralph Hinckley, and they changed his last name because
John Hinckley.
81. John Hinckley. Because Hinckley took a shot at Reagan, they changed his name to Hanley. And then unceremoniously somewhere in season 2, they just returned it to Hinckley. But I remember that specifically, like you couldn't go to Google and be like, wait a minute, his name was Hinckley. Now it's Hanley. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's and I think over the years they've tried to reboot this. I think William Katt wrote a comic book series, tried to update it. But that was the big show for me.
But Jeff, didn't you feel like all the stories were exactly the same?
Of course, but that was every TV show, though. Every TV show, whether it was the A-Team or Dukes of Hazzard or, it just Voyagers. That was a big show that came out that year as well.
Yeah. But there was no carry through. There was no overarching.
No, they never learned anything. They never you never, except for the fact that he, eventually he started to learn things about the suit, but it's not like the aliens ever came back and said, oh, here's a backup manual.
Yeah. So it felt like whenever you watched an episode of any of these shows, that it was like they were treating you as if you were coming into it new. Like, the same tropes were in every episode.
Oh, yeah. And everything was nicely wrapped up within the 45 minutes,
Yeah. So they had very much in mind, like the first time viewer as well as anybody coming back to it.
Right.
So
like every episode, they'd have to mention that he lost the manual.
The manual. And of course, they were in the opening sequence. They would always give you the whole origin, so you could catch yourself up to it as well. So my pick for 82, I kind of looked elsewhere other than the prime time shows, and I'd say Saturday Night Live. This was my favorite cast, I think, ever of Saturday Night Live. This was an Eddie. Again, we're mentioning Eddie Murphy here, but this was the heyday of Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo, Tim Kazurinsky. Julia Louis-Dreyfus came onto the show. So all of Eddie Murphy's classic characters, Mr. Robinson, Buckwheat. Remember the whole, Buckwheat was shot kind of Nightline parody that they had.
That's right, yeah.
So and also Brad Hall was the Weekend Update anchorman during that time as well. So there may have been other casts later on that maybe were slightly funnier, like the Adam Sandler, Chris Farley years, but because it was my childhood and it's really the first time I was watching. My father would often tape it on VHS and we would watch it the next day on Sunday.
I wish I had your father. He sounds like a cool guy.
There was he was
spoon feeding you this stuff, man.
He was
great.
Completely. He was like a huge Stephen King fan as well, so I would read all those novels. I feel like I was getting away with something. So
there you go.
So yeah, because of that, that was my first generation of Saturday Night Live. So I always look back at those episodes fondly.
Nice.
So Mike, what do you got? TV wise.
So it's something that Jeff just had me reconsidering because I had not, in my mind, I thought Cheers started in 1984 because that's when I started to watch it. But it didn't. It actually started in 82. Yep. But I don't remember it in 82, so I won't select it. But I love that initial cast and just, the way that Diane and Sam worked with Coach and, everyone else in Cheers. And if anyone's ever in Boston, it's named after the Bull and Finch.
Yep.
Don't waste your time.
Right. We went there, but
so just heads up. And if in Boston, don't go.
Yeah.
But the show that stuck with me was Magnum PI. And so this is one that I look forward to, and I think it was on Thursday night, if not, I think it was Thursday night. Right, and it was up against a new show that was released that year also, which was Fame, about the School of Performing Arts in New York. And I like both of them, but I kind of lean towards Magnum PI because I was invested in it since it started in 1980. But I really just liked, how the characters interacted. So it was Tom Selleck, and then you had sort of doing the narration through the shows, as well as his friends Higgins, TC, Rick.
That's right.
There was always a Ferrari chase scene, and Magnum always got the girls. So
again, right. Every week it's different chase scene, but it's always the same kind of trope.
Yeah, and the background of Hawaii was just awesome.
Right.
So I mean, we're out here, with 4 seasons of weather, and in Hawaii, it's beautiful every day.
Right?
Yeah. Here's this dude getting all the girls in his Ferrari with his friends. And
I want to be that guy.
I want to be that guy. Yeah. And I'm not that guy.
Are you aware of the reboot that they're pushing? I saw a trailer for it, and when we went to go see Ant-Man and Wasp, and I'm like, that. Why?
Yeah.
It's a movie. It's a movie.
No, it's a TV show. They're bringing it back, but it's a young guy, just like when they tried to reboot MacGyver with a different actor, but it's like he doesn't have a mustache. I don't even think he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
I think probably because they saw that Hawaii Five-0 was a hit when they rebooted that. So why not?
Magnum for a while though. That's been out for quite some time now.
It has.
And they brought in like 3/4 of the cast from Lost since they were already in Hawaii anyway. So
I'm sure they didn't want to leave either.
No.
None of us mentioned Knight Rider. That was 82.
Oh, that's right. You said you were going to watch the first episode.
I did. I watched the first episode. I didn't. In the end, I didn't really want to choose it as my show. But I watched the first episode, and I couldn't believe it. It's an origin story of like who Michael Knight was and all this stuff.
Oh, okay.
I had no remember. his original name, Michael Long, he gets shot in the face because he's a detective, right? There's really a convoluted espionage plot going on, and Michael Long, the detective, is in the middle of it. It's a double cross. He gets shot in the face, and the bullet comes, you don't see it, but it's described. The bullet went through his forehead and came out his face because he had a metal plate in Vietnam.
It bounced back out?
It bounced back out. So his face was obliterated, and this kindly billionaire, who is Mr. Knight, takes him and gives him plastic surgery to look like himself as a young man, and which looks like David Hasselhoff. And
because that's what I do if I had billions of dollars.
Yeah. So
he's a replicant.
So he takes Michael Long's car, which is a Trans Am, and puts all this technology in it. The Knight 2000.
Knight Industries 2000.
And brings Michael Long on board as like a private crime fighter, I guess. And like so this guy's like a philanthropist who wants to do good in his final years. So he dies at the end of the episode, sets Michael Knight up, with a new face, with a new team of his old butler. I guess another word for it would be their pit stop team, I guess. So So they set up this episode, and Michael Knight, he gets revenge on the people that shot him in the face by the end of the pilot, and then it sets him up for many episodes later. But there's so many cheesy scenes of Kit, the car, doing jumps over nothing.
Over nothing, yeah. Well, that was Dukes of Hazzard everywhere.
Yeah, it was Dukes of Hazzard. Like there'd be a pile
and there were leaves around 24/7 all year round. So whenever they landed, the leaves would go flying.
So whenever Kit had to get around like a pile up of smashed cars, he would jump over an unseen ramp from and you would assume that it's from his own power. Yeah, yep. But yeah, it was.
And that went on for years. That was on for quite a while.
So, and I watched that all the time, but not realizing, I don't think I ever saw the pilot because I had no idea that this backstory existed.
Well, that was even watching the first episode of Greatest American Hero. I mean, it's pretty dark, in Robert Culp's character there. Like he's a jerk. Like he's like an absolute jerk. And I'm like, why would I like watching it? Only later, I think they kind of created this chemistry. But yeah, the first episode was it's a little heavy-handed.
So there's the TV of 1982.
Yeah. There's one other show we didn't mention. Okay. It only lasted 1 year.
What
but
did
I think it was pretty impactful. Square Pegs.
Was that the Sarah Jessica Parker?
Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you're right at the cusp of truly the 80s. So you had, your Valley Girl. I think Sarah Jessica Parker was just like, she just wanted to be in everything. It was a fun show. It only lasted, the kids in high school. It only lasted one season, but Merritt Buttrick, who was Kirk's son in Star Trek II, was on the show as well. Tracy Nelson was in it. Her father was Ricky Nelson, and her brothers were the Nelson.
Okay.
And she went on to Father Donnelly Mysteries. But it was big because the music soundtrack was all like this cutting edge stuff from the 80s at the time. The Waitresses did the soundtrack. Square Pegs, Square Pegs, Square Pegs. I'm sure if you heard it, you would know it. Mm-hmm. But Billy Idol, Doors, Squeeze, Clash, Berlin, B-52s, Devo, all of those bands and acts were played either they had graphics on the wall inside the radio station, or they had Star Trek, or they had on the soundtrack stuff. So this was all like real early 80s music kind of coming on that I had never experienced. Everyone I listened to or knew listened to heavy metal, but yeah, it only lasted one season.
Perfect segue into our next category, music. Which would be music. Yeah. So I kind of tackled this by looking at my current collection and seeing like what were my favorites that happened to be released in 82, and far and away my favorite album of the year was Asia.
Oh my gosh!
I love Asia. I had a T-shirt. I had everything.
I went off the podcast.
Right.
See, that was my choice. That was mine as well.
Heat of the moment, and I lived and breathed by the Casey Kasem Top 40 back then. I listened to that religiously every Sunday, and I was so personally offended when Heat of the Moment did not hit number one. But Asia was like a super group, quote unquote. It was John Wetton from King Crimson. It was Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on drums. Jeff Downs and Steve Howe from Yes. So they, this ragtag group of, lesser known musicians get together, call themselves a super group, and name the group Asia. And there's a lot of cowbell on this album. Only Time Will Tell, Heat of the Moment.
Yeah.
It's just like early 80s power kind of. It's
and
kind
a
of
great
like
album cover. The cover.
Yeah, that cover is so iconic.
Coming out of the water. Yeah.
The serpent coming out of the water.
I'm sure there's many out there who probably had that tattoo.
Yeah, but I loved that album, Asia. I
so
ran
funny.
that tape down, and I have it proudly on CD on my shelf. And yes, I still have CDs.
I'll follow that because I see Mike's in disgust already. But that was one of the songs. So in '82, pop culture moment for Jeff Chandler was the fact that my parents allowed me to get Columbia House record. Subscription.
Big
And
deal.
if anybody doesn't know what this is, I mean, you couldn't download songs. You had to go to the record store, which that would be, I had to go to the mall. And so for 1 penny, you could get 6 albums. And they just had like this whole list of albums. Maybe you saw 1 or 2 of the covers, and it was just absolutely agonizing choosing which 6 albums I'm going to get for my initial penny. Because back in the day, you maybe knew 1 or 2 songs. You didn't know all 12 songs off an album. You couldn't go to iTunes and select it and sample it. You know, you pick and choose. You bought the entire album.
Yeah, it was always based on that single. You know, that's
or the album cover. I remember a couple years later, you know, as I got older, REM, and they kept it was Murmurs, and it was they hyped it as like the #1 college album of the year. And I wanted to be part of that college crowd, and I couldn't pull the trigger. I couldn't bring myself to actually buy this album, not knowing any song off it, other than the fact that it was touted as a #1 college album. Like that to me was enough, but I couldn't. But Asia was one of the first albums. Adamant, of course I mentioned this last week, or no, I think it was when we were texting, was Olivia Newton-John's Physical. That has a fold out spread.
Was the Adamant one the one with Goody Two Shoes on it?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. But again, these were all albums that I maybe knew 1 or 2 songs, but that was it. The genre of most people that I grew up with were listening to heavy metal. So this was like brand new to me. But the Asia one really stuck out. So that's so funny you chose that out of all the albums.
Right.
So sorry, Mike. We're lame.
Well, I mean, the best thing about Asia that I can say is the album cover.
Right.
The album cover was awesome, but what was inside the album, in my opinion, not so awesome. Mine was, and I took a different approach to this. I just looked up the, top songs from 1982 and then said, what really struck with me. And my selections are Don't You Want Me by the Human League.
Yeah.
And then Soft Cell's Tainted Love.
Yes.
And I think part of this was, they were both coming out of England. And, I was exposed more to like the Who and that sort of stuff. And that was a different sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, so what's the music scene like, happening over there? And, I was so curious about it. And then kind of nothing really came out of, England for a couple of years, but I was still curious about it and eventually went there to better understand what was happening there. And when I finally arrived in 1986, I decided I liked Bruce Springsteen better. So those were my tops for 82, at least from a recollection standpoint.
I remember I loved Tainted Love, the song, and that Soft Cell album was the first one that I went out to the store to buy with my own money, the little cassette tape, Caldor, I remember. And I was so disappointed with the album itself.
See, but that's right. You invest in this entire thing, and it's like, I like that one song, and now I'm stuck with all these others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, didn't Rio come out, Duran Duran?
It did. They didn't. I don't think that really took hold until the following year, the early part of '83, when it was played.
I think I secretly liked it and made fun of anybody who actually did like it.
Yeah, so did I. And I actually saw them in concert in Hartford, Connecticut.
Really?
I saw them in Radio City.
Yeah, surrounded. We were like, the 6 boys in the audience.
Yeah,
you could have hooked up, man.
I saw them on the reunion tour when it was the 5 of them coming back, and probably about 10 years ago at Madison Square Garden. It was great.
I saw them at Radio City. It was probably about 20 years ago, though. But
it's fun. There was some other things. There's a lot of novelty songs that came out.
Pac-Man Fever, which I think we should end this whole episode on the Pac-Man just going, just dying.
Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Take Off, if you guys remember that. Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Oh, yes.
Take Off to the Great White North. And I was reading and I had that album, the comedy album from Bob and Doug McKenzie, the Great White North album. Interesting fact is that Take Off, the song from that album, hit number 16 on the U.S. charts. It was Geddy Lee's biggest chart hit. No other song from Rush ever made it past number 16. So
wow,
that's hilarious to me. That it took Bob and Doug McKenzie to get Geddy Lee on the charts. And Rick Moranis, the reason that he's on that record is that he went to high school with Rick Moranis. Did Geddy Lee?
Really? No.
both Canadians. And also, I would like to shout out Ebony and Ivory from 1982 for giving us the pronunciation piano.
Piano.
Side by side on my piano. So
Piano.
yeah.
Keyboard. Oh Lord.
So I'm just looking. I'm just looking at this Asia Heat of the Moment by Asia for the year-end charts. Only made it to 40. Where the classic that I
year-end, right? That wouldn't be its top chart position.
No, but that's the year-end. I'm just wanted to point that out. And then Don't You Want Me by the Human League, number 6. So it would appear that the people agree with me. And actually, just so you know, Pac-Man Fever was number 42. That's how close it was.
Where was I Love Rock and Roll on that?
Number 3.
Up to number 3. That was
number 1 was Physical.
And then Eye of the Tiger was number 2.
Ooh, I also loved Men at Work, Business as Usual. Yes, that was a big album for me too. That was my first concert, Men at Work.
That was one of my albums. The other album that I forgot about was Richard Pryor Live on Sunset Strip.
Oh,
and this was really one of the first times that I heard like naughty language,
right?
Like in my bedroom, listening to this because they were albums. Only later did I start buying cassettes because albums were, what my parents did.
E.T. came up before. One of the worst songs, I think, in the history of songs.
Heartlight.
Came out in 82. And I think this may be the reason why E.T. doesn't have the status today of Star Wars and the rest. I think Neil Diamond may be why.
Is this another song by Asia you're going to bring up? Or?
This is Neil Diamond's Heartlight.
Heartlight, which he wrote for the soundtrack, and it didn't make it onto the album.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. If you lyrically, it's one of the worst songs. Home is the most excellent place. Like,
well, that's you wanted to go home. I will say that I took my parents to Madison Square Garden to go see Neil Diamond a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think when you retire at 65, you're given a copy of Heartlight. That's one of the. Nobody under 65 should be listening. No. In fact, me and my friends, we make fun of this song relentlessly. And we, of course, being 11 years old, we would rename it Fartlight.
Oh,
we would sing it in that same kind of Neil Diamond delivery. Turn on your fartlight,
and then laughing maniacally like 11-year-olds do. You said fart.
Yeah. I think 82 was a great year musically. Again, I mentioned before, I listened every Sunday to the Casey Kasem American Top 40.
We all did.
Yeah, which was a syndicated radio show.
Yep.
And it was important, to me to find out who was number 1. I could not leave anywhere until that show was over. I was staying put by the radio.
Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Yeah. To see if I Love Rock and Roll and Joan Jett held on to the position, or if somebody usurped it. Or We Got the Beat, I think, was a big hit back then too. In 82 by the Go-Go's. I think I had that record. So yeah, a lovely year for music was 82.
Yep.
And for films
and TV.
So I think this is a good, we've covered the 3 main topics that we wanted to hit. This is a good enough time as any for our confessional.
Confessionals.
Oh, I forgot what we're confessing.
Yeah, no. Probably not one that you would have to think too much about, but the confessional, I think, should be based around our subject year. So if you could go back in time, thinking pop culture-wise, to 1982, what would be the first thing that you would do if you could go back in time to 1982?
I'll tell you what I would do.
What would you do?
First of all, I'd take a lot of money with me. I would go to every discount.
You would have to look at the bills and make sure that.
Well, yeah, I'd have a suitcase a la Doc Brown with all the different timestamps on them, so I made sure I wasn't screwing anything with the time continuum.
So where would you go? What store
would you go to? Every discount grocery store, and I would take every Star Wars action figure left on the pegs, and I would buy every one of them and stuff them away somewhere.
Yeah, I think I would go to a record store. I think that's because my big obsession, I think, began in 82 with David Bowie from the Katt People soundtrack and his song Katt People. That was the first Bowie song I really loved. And I became a collector a few years later. And a lot of stuff was still on the shelves in 82 because his company RCA would put out picture discs galore in the early 80s. So I think I would go to a record shop and buy out the entire Bowie set. So how about you, Mike? What would you do if you could go back?
I wasn't going either way. This is just going to come from the heart. I think I'd go back and make a different girlfriend decision, to be quite honest with you.
Well, no, this is pop culture because, honestly, if I were to go back, I would probably...
That influences...
Yeah, I would see both my grandfathers again because they've been gone for quite some time. But, not on a personal level, but on a purely pop culture level, what would you do?
Well, following sort of in Jeff's theme, right? Because it's like all about, boy, if I had only done that, and I do still collect comic books,
Yeah.
but I wasn't collecting all the right ones back in 1982.
Right,
and even with a little bit of money, I'd be a millionaire, right? If I just made the right choices back then.
And don't read them.
Yeah, because in 1982, we were buying what we were reading, right? And maybe we were collecting some other ones as well. And it was a good time to be reading comic books. But, I mean, I go back and I look at the price guides, and I'm thinking, in 1982, I could have had an Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man, for like, $300.
Right, which back then was a ridiculous amount of money.
Right.
But knowing now how much it goes for, even a beat-up copy.
Right. I just
would
would
have bought that copy of Spider-Man that you showed us last week, the first appearance of the Punisher. You probably could have.
No, he'd have the time travel. Didn't that come out in '86?
Yeah, it came out later.
That was later.
He'd have to wait.
Not sure.
No, was it 70? Maybe it was earlier. I'm trying to remember when the Punisher.
I think that was already out by '82.
1974.
74. Wow, it's older than I thought. Yeah, and
So
if you
I picked that up.
Yeah, that's great. If you Google image, this cover's been replicated like 100 times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's just
iconic.
been cover swiped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so iconic.
Yeah, maybe I reconsider then my choice of first store to go into. Maybe I would also visit a comic shop back then.
Well, I remember the first Star Wars convention. It was 10-year anniversary, so it was '87, and one of the vendors it was a very small show up in Boston, and this guy had all the original action figures on in the package on the card. And he was asking $100 for them, which was just ridiculous. Now you can't touch these things for a couple thousand each. But yeah, they probably all those old hammerheads and these guys that sat on the peg warmers there that no kid wanted.
Yeah, because at that time it was between Star Wars movies, so it was between Empire.
Yeah, the Empire had already come out.
So yeah, you would have the
snowtroopers were probably just, but even then,
probably on clearance at that time by '82.
Right. So I would have cleaned up.
Yeah, we can put '82 to bed. I think it was a success. I had a lot of fun.
I like it. Yeah, it was fun kind of going down this road, remembering what 14-year-old Jeff was like.
Yeah.
Video games. Yeah, the Pac-Man. I think for Christmas that year, I got like one of those handheld Space Invaders, and I just played this thing ad nauseum. Everywhere we went, I had it in my hand.
Yeah, I think I had the big toy for me back then because, as we said, it was an off year for Star Wars. So probably G.I. Joe, the new brand of G.I. Joe stuff that was coming out then.
The small ones that matched,
with the super articulated figures that had
but they matched the size of the Star Wars figure.
Exactly, yeah. And all that cool gear that you used to be able to get, like the Cobra Jeep and the hovercraft and
and they had the aircraft carrier, which was like the size of a small car.
Yeah, my friend had that. I never had that. Yeah. I had the jet with the guy with the parachute that could eject out of it.
But you mentioned aircraft carrier and nothing compares then.
No, that thing was just a monstrosity.
That would take up your whole room.
But that was a choice of pride right there. You're like, look at this, look what I got.
So we already gave our what our classic choice of our next classic movie was going to be last week, but just to reiterate, One Crazy Summer, Jeff's pick. So we're going to watch that for next week. So if you want to watch it along with us, please feel free. And our main feature next week is going to be A Quiet Place, which is Blu-ray, DVD. So Jeff,
I know.
Get on your adult diapers.
I know.
On the lights.
I will have to send my wife away because she will not even. If The Exorcist is on, she won't even be in the house.
Oh yeah, I won't watch that.
No way.
I won't watch that.
So okay.
So nobody ever picked The Exorcist, please, for class.
Okay. We don't have to watch it together just to watch all of us squirm.
Yeah. So that's next. So everybody wants to watch along with us and be ready for next week. A Quiet Place and One Crazy Summer.
Can we find a way to tie these two together?
I guess we'll find out. Think about it. Yeah.
1982. It was a good year.
The film is winding up, so I think we can call it a day for this one. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, bye.
Out.